Welcome back, Colts. This is Readiness Assessment 3, the second half, so it's going to be questions number 9 through 18. So starting with question 9, it says find the slope and the y-intercept of the graph y equals 3/2 x minus 4. And so if we remember, our slope is m and our y-intercept is b. So our slope in this case is going to be, if we remember the format, it's y equals mx plus b. And our slope is going to be that m, which is always with our x. So our fraction in this case is 3/2. So our slope in this case is 3/2, and our y-intercept, okay, a lot of times people will say 4, but don't forget the negative is going to be a -4. And that's all we have to do for number 9 in that case. Okay, moving on to question number 10, it says which of the following equations has a slope of 2/3 and a y-intercept of -2? So if we were to put it in this form, y equals mx plus b, it would be y equals 2/3 x minus 2. So if we remember, our y-intercept is going to be that b. So let me zoom in a little bit so we can see a little bit better. So it's important just going through and seeing the format of these to be able to see which one matches that. So a lot of times we'll say, all right, well, I have a -2 and I have a 2/3 already, so we might click that one, or we might bubble in that one. But if I do y minus 2 equals 2/3 x, and I get the y by itself, and I add that 2 to both sides, I end up with y equals 2/3 x plus 2, and our y-intercept is now no longer a -2, and it's a +2. So it's not going to be A. So if we go down to B, now we see that our x and our y are switched. So we can go through and we can solve, but it's going to take a little bit of work in this case to get the y by itself. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides, and I get x plus 2 equals 2/3 y. And we don't like fractions, so to get rid of fractions, we multiply by that reciprocal on both sides. Okay, and then we would end up with 3/2 x, and then we would multiply this here, and we would do 3 times 2 on top, and we would get 6/2 equals, these guys would cancel out, just y. So I'd end up with 3/2 x plus 3 equals y, which does not fit our classification of what it was asking for. So it's not going to be B. Okay, moving this sticky note, and let me erase some of this guy. Okay, we're going to go to C. Now in C, if I wanted to get it by itself, well, it's already by itself, but it's not written in the order of how we normally have it, where we have our slope first. So if I just were to rewrite this, I would say y equals my 2/3 x, and it's still a -2 or a -2, and I would say, hey, that fits what it's asking. So just to make sure, because a lot of these have select all but apply sometimes, if I look at D, my slope in this case for D is -2, and my y-intercept is 2/3, which is switched, so it's not going to be D. So in that case, it's going to be C. Okay, moving on to number 11. Number 11 says, what is an equation in the slope-intercept form for the graph shown? So again, we need our slope, and we need our y-intercept, which is going to be our b. And then we will plug it in to our y equals mx plus b. So looking at this one, our slope is going to be, because it's going up, remember we go from left to right, it's going to be positive. So we know we're going to have a positive value. Okay, if you want to put the plus out front, you can. Just know that we are not going to have a negative. I'm going to write it as a fraction, even if it's a whole number. I'm still going to put it over 1. So I can pick this 0.6 here, and I can find another one, but I'm going to go actually use these 2 nice points that they already have on the graph. So if I were to travel from this point down here, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. So that means I'm going to rise 3, and then I'm going to run 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to rise 3, and I'm going to run 4. And I can't reduce that, so I'm going to leave my slope as 3/4 with an x, right? The x is not part of the slope. Our x is our input value, but that 3/4 is our slope. And then we look for b, and we say, where does it cross our y-axis? And it has right here a nice coordinate, 0, 6. And so we're going to say that it crosses at 6 in this case. And so because it's positive, we're going to say plus 6. And that gives us our equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, moving on to number 12. It says the graph of a linear equation has the same slope as the graph in item 11, so using our equation from number 11, but the y-intercept is 7 less than the y-intercept from number 11. So what is the equation of the graph? So it doesn't say anything about the slopes changing, says the same. But our y-intercept up above here was 6. So I'm going to bring that 6 down here. And I'm going to say, all right, I have a 6, and it's going to be 7 less. So I'm going to go 7 less from it. So 6 minus 7 is going to give me that -1. So I end up with a y-intercept of -1. And so that gives me my new equation. Okay, moving on to number 13. Number 13, it's telling us to write it in slope-intercept form. And remember we talked about that. That's a fancy way for saying get the y by itself. We want y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to rewrite it down here. And they give us a little bit of space for this one, which is nice. We're going to get the y by itself. So now you can subtract 2x if you want, or you can move the 9. So I'm going to move the 9 because I want the y to be by itself, and that way it's less work. So 2x plus 9 equals 1/3 y. And if that confuses you, go ahead and rewrite it as 1/3 y equals 2x plus 9. It's going to give us the same thing. And then we have that fraction. And to get rid of that fraction, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, so we'll use a different color just to help us to see it. And the reciprocal, remember, is we take that fraction and we flip it over. So I'm going to multiply this side also by 3/1. And remember, everybody gets affected by that fraction, or that reciprocal that we're multiplying by. So these guys cancel out, and I'm left with just y equals. I take this 3/1, which is just 3, which is nice because it's not a more complicated fraction. And I'm going to do 2x times 3 is going to give me 6x. And then I'm going to do 3 times +9 is going to give me 27. So rewriting that equation that we had, we're going to end up with y equals 6x plus 27, which is a lot simpler to graph if they asked us to do that. Okay, moving on over to number 14. Number 14 says, which statement about the graph of a horizontal line is true? So this is just reviewing. If we remember, horizontal lines, are they the ones that go up and down, or are they the ones that go left and right? And remember, we talked about how it's like the horizon, so seeing the sunrise or the sunset. And if we remember, the slope in that case is going to be 0. Positive slope is if we're going up, negative slope is if we are going down, and then our undefined slope is when we have our vertical line. Okay, moving on to number 15. Each number on the list of numbers is 3 more. Okay, so 3 more is a fancy way for saying we're going to add 3 more than numbers before. And the first number on our list is -4, and so it wants to know the 5th number. So let's start. If this is my first number, is -4, I'm going to say, okay, what's my second number? So we're going to add 3. If we add 3 to that, we end up with -1. Third number, fourth number, and then 5th number. So if I add 3 again, I'm going to end up with 2. If I add 3 again, I'm going to end up with 5. And if I add 3 again, I'm going to end up with 8. And if it helps you, write on there that you are adding 3 every time. And so remember, we did things kind of like this last time, or last semester. So in this case, it wants us to find the 5th number. So our 5th number in this case is going to be the number 8. Okay, scrolling down to number 16. If you notice, we got 8, 5, 2, blank, -4. It's just like our one we did here in number 15, but it's backwards. So now I have 8, 5, 2. So if we notice in this case, and instead of going up by 3, it's going to go down by 3. So if I do 2 minus 3, I'm going to end up with -1. -1 minus 3 also gives me -4, and -4 minus 3 gives me -7. So I end up with -1 for this case. And if it helps you, you could circle it maybe because you got lots of numbers. Okay, number 17. This one gives us an expression, 6 minus 2/3 parentheses n minus 1, where n is the positive integer that gives the position of the number in the list. And so it says, what is the 13th number in the list? So in this case, think about it, what number should we plug in? Well, we want the 13th number. So does that mean we're just going to pick 13? No, that's not what it's asking us. So we're going to take that expression and we're going to plug in the number 13. So we're going to say 6 minus 2/3, 13 minus 1. And this is where we use our order of operations. It's really important. So if you remember from PEMDAS, some of you might have done, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we do parentheses first. So I'm going to do 13 minus 1, and that's going to give me 12. Okay, we'll fix our negative a little bit. And then it says exponents. We don't have any exponents. And then we do have some multiplication, though. Our multiplication is going to be these right here, off to the side here. So I'm going to do negative 2/3 times 12. And I'm going to write that 12 over 1 to help us. And I'm going to do a negative times a positive is going to be a negative. And if it helps you, just multiply the top numbers and then the bottom numbers. And some of you might see that you can simplify it. But 2 times 12 is going to give us 24, and 3 times 1 is going to give us 3. If you know your factors, you could also say 3 goes into 3 once and goes into 12 4 times and do it that way. So I still have a 6 here. 6 minus 24 over 3, well, if we know our multiplication facts and our division, we know that 24 divided by 3 is going to give us 8. And so 6 minus 8 is going to give us negative 2. We go over to our multiple choice, and we see that one of our options, B, is negative 2. And then our last question, number 18, compare the 20th entries in each of the lists. Which has the largest 20th number? So right now, it's not asking you to find it. I mean, you can go all the way to the end, but we want to find which one will give us the biggest number, right? So if I go from negative 8 to negative 5, how much am I increasing or am I decreasing? Well, in this case, I'm getting less and less negatives, so that means I'm adding a number. And I'm adding 3 in this case. If I look at this one, I'm adding 3, and I'm adding 3. So you say, okay, that one pluses by 3. So if I were to get to 20, if I look at B, this one is going up by just 1. And so we see already that A has bigger numbers because 1 is more positive than a negative 9. So right away we know B is not going to be the case, and it's also only increasing by 1, whereas A is increasing so much faster because it's going up by 3. If we look at C, we go from negative 13 to negative 11, and we see that it is increasing by 2 every single time. So almost as much as A, but definitely more than B. And then we'll go to check our last one. If I go from negative 16 to negative 11, I'm increasing as well, and I'm going up by 5. So maybe it started at a much more negative number, but because I'm going up by 5, it's going to grow so much more faster. So we're going to say that option D is going to have the largest 20th number. And that concludes Readiness Assessment Part 2.